golly.
And I said to Jim
That's something.
the other day, oh, I forgot what we used to, what the dickens was it we were talking about? Oh, I could make a big book of shoeing horses. Everything was done out there.
Yeah.
We had to.
People almost forgot a lot of those things, haven't they?
Oh, yeah, I can't believe all the...
You're going to be 81 when now?
August.
Of 1985.
Yeah.
You're going to have your knee operated on here in next month, probably.
That's right.
Well, I told you what they did with horses, didn't I?
Yeah, take them out and shoot them.
That's right. When you get a bad leg, so you better be careful.
You'll feel bad when you take me out and shoot me.
There you go. Make glue out of you or something, huh?
See, there's other things that I've got. Oh, I know. Well, I'll go ahead here. Let's see.
Are you going to read me your life's history now that you've written
do
up?
you want to hear all this stuff?
Sure. Why not?
4, 5,
How long ago did you do this?
7.
3 or 4 years?
3 or 4 years ago.
And why did you do it?
8. Oh, I know. Aunt Bird back in Moline. I was back there visiting.
Now, she wasn't even a member of church then, was she?
No. And she says, you know what we ought to do, sis? We ought to write a little history of our life. And she said, I'll tell you what, you write yours and I'll write mine. Let's see who can get through the fastest and mail them to each other. She mailed me hers, and then she took sick and died, and I never...
And it's funny, you both saw things, some of the things were the same, but you also saw things that were more meaningful to each other.
Yes, right.
Well, why don't you share that with us now?
I'm like Johnny Carson.
Yeah, no, he doesn't use that thumb. That's right.
Gonna be a long one here.
Alrighty. I've only got 6 hours of tape, so is that enough?
Yeah.
All right.
Oh, I know when I wrote this in 1978. January 2nd, 1978.
Right, like it's supposed to be.
And I headlined it, A Little History of Your Life, because in your childhood days it was so different from ours. Well, I've made a New Year's resolution. That is to go and try to remember some of the events that took place. My parents were John Henry and my dad, and my mom was Lavina Gerard Warren. I was born August the 8th, 1904 at Muddy, Utah, which I don't remember. My father had a large stock ranch and raised cattle by the hundreds. I remember as a little girl how much fun it was to wander through the fields of alfalfa and wild hay. Then a few years later, that spelled work for me. My brother Elmer, who was 2.5 years older, and my older sisters, we'd get up around 5 in the morning, dress fast, go out, take our milk buckets and milk from 8 to 10 or 12 cows. Then feed our horses before returning to the house for breakfast. After breakfast, one of us would drive the cows to the pasture for the day, which was about a mile away. Then we would go get them at night. But now let me tell you where Muddy is. Where it's located. It is in the extreme west corner of Box Elder County, about 30 miles from Park Valley, between the Lincoln Highway. There you will finally see a long fields of mellow hay, and our ranch was the first one at the top.
What does mellow hay mean?
Just beautiful.
Real good hay.
It was a beautiful place, and our family thought that's where anyone could come, relax, rest, and sleep from 1 week to years if they wanted to, and never had to pay. Our house and bunkhouse was built out of logs, very humble but home. Dad never charged anyone. We would have so many every summer come to our ranch for their vacation. Mayor Tom Browning, Abe Glassman, Flieger Hardware, Potter Cafe, Mrs. Bertha Eccles, and so on from Ogden. Then several families from Montello. Also, Dad would always kill his choice beef for them and for us to be cooked in many ways, and would always send a quarter or a half a beef for them to take home. Oh, yeah. They also loved the summer vacation there for the big picnics, which Mother would prepare. She would have Dutch ovens filled with fried chicken, fried potatoes, homemade bread and butter, and pans of cake. Some of us would ride our saddle horses, put gunny sacks over the horn of the saddle, and go up in the canyons and fill it with snow. then come back, and Mom would have an ice cream freezer all ready. And we'd have homemade ice cream after the picnic. The men would take their guns and hunt sage hens, which were very plentiful.
Sage hen was like a pheasant, only smaller, kind of?
Huh?
Sage hen is kind of like a pheasant, only smaller?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Then home to clean and cook the sage hens, which Mother baked in cream, very yummy for vacations. The fields were long with streams of water and willows through the center. When I was young and very small, Mother would have me take at 10:30 lunch to the hayman. She would put a little rope around my shoulders, tie a bucket of milk and cups on one end and a bucket of cut-up cake on the other, and send me on my way. We sometimes had wildcats in the fields, so I'd sing real loud as I was walking, thinking that would scare them away. At the age of perhaps 8, I was a derrick boy. I would ride the horse all day. This would trip the fork. My sister Bird would run the mowing machine, and Brother Elmer would be on the rake. Everyone said I was the best derrick boy in the country, but then a few years later, I ran the rake. Time went on, and Dad heard about the buck rakes and stacker, so he sent to Burton Implement Company here in Ogden and had them ship out the modern between the railroad station, Watercress, and LeMay. He would take 100 head or so of cattle there to feed on the bunch grass, this saving the hay at home. He'd stay there around 3 months, then drive the cattle back to the ranch in the spring. By then I was around 14 years old. We had loads of hay. We would load the hay rack of hay, put a good team of horses on, and start out at daylight for the desert, arriving there just after dark. This was around 30 miles from home 2 or 3 times. I dress extra warm and sink down in the hay with plenty of quilts and hot rocks at my feet. I think all of us took our turns. At that, the horses just about knew the way. Dad would always have a nice warm cabin and a big pot of bay-o beans for us. We'd rested there so and return home. Our winters were very severe. Snow would be deep, and the drifts would go to Park Valley or something where we needed. We'd usually saddle 2 horses, go ahead of us and break the trail for the sleighs for a few miles. We'd get our mail only 2 or 3 times during the winter. In other words, we were almost snowed in. We'd order the groceries by mail from J.S. Carver and Son in the fall spring, and would go to Terrace or later Watercress about 2 weeks later to meet the train and load our groceries.
Where did the groceries come from? Ogden?
Ogden.
Okay.
J.S. Carver's. Dad would select a good strong team and a double-bedded wagon. This trip would take from daylight till after dark. We'd order a ton of flour, 500 pounds of sugar, of brown sugar to make the tea, and 100 pounds of rice, maybe 100 pounds of macaroni, 25-pound boxes. We'd get of dried apples, prunes, raisins, plus all kinds of spices. Spices, flavoring, yeast, cakes, pepper, and salt. We raised our own beef, pork, lamb, chickens, eggs, and potatoes, had all the milk we could drink, and made our own butter. For years we would skim the cream from the milk pans and make butter using a tall churn with a dasher. This gave us plenty of buttermilk also. We'd keep our milk and cream sweet by putting in jars and sinking it in the water barrel. Our drinking water was piped from a small spring above the house. Then in later years we heard about a milk which was a change from skimming pans for cream and milk. In the spring of the year, sheepmen would have herds of sheep, taking them from the desert to the hills and mountains in the spring. We would follow them a few days later pick pieces of wool from the sagebrush, take it home in sacks, where Mother would wash and dry it. Then pull it, he would put it back on a quilt on the frames, put a layer of wool, and then put the top on the quilt. Quilt designs or make a top. Our winters were very severe and we had to prepare for months of cold weather. Driving during the summer, during the summer a peddler would come. His name was Mr. Alberts. Caps, underwear, shoes, and overshoes. If we didn't have overshoes, we would wrap our feet in gunny sacks. And when we went to school, we had to heat rocks to put our feet on to keep warm. Our school was around 3 miles away, so we usually had one-horse cart with shafts. Or in the winter, a bobsleigh. The schoolhouse was a one-room frame with a large wood stove in one end. And each morning, one of us would get a bucket of water from Highlands, a short distance, and all of us used the same old gray dipper to drink. There was from 5 to 8 boys and girls, and from 1 to 2 in different classes. It would take us, my brother and I, around 2 hours to travel each way. We were always supposed to walk the horses. One time, Dad bought us 2 little white burros to ride. That was really fun. When they'd come to a ditch of water, they'd stop. We'd have to get off and lead them across. Our ranch had a long paintbrush.
What did they paint on it?
Paint them with flour and water.
Oh, flour and water.
And hang them all around the cellar, and this would keep the air out, and it was just like, and our cellars were cool.
And the flies and everything else.
Oh, yeah, and this would keep them until the following summer. So she made sausage that was delicious. And for breakfast, big plates of, if I quit now. Sounds like it.
No, I'll put you on.
But I have to finish it someday.
I'm just, that, you didn't finish it?
No, it's all finished.
Oh, it is finished?
No, I'll have to finish
it.
This. You've got to leave space.
Okay, so that's where you're up to that point then, huh?
Yeah.
Well, that was really neat. You're a sweetheart, huh?
But I still got more to write.
Well, you better get going.
I think maybe I should have a book made of this.
I think so,
Just
too.
put memories.
You know what I'm going to do? It's funny you mention
This
that.
could be a book made, a paperback book.
Okay, I'm going to show you what I decided to do. Where is she now?
In her grave.
In her grave up in heaven.
That's right.
All right, and you might not be here forever either, so we have to get this thing going. Now is the time, any way you look at it, right?
Yep.
All right. Thanks, Mom. Now we'll go on.
You should show this to Barbara and Vernon. They're kids. Stephen will just eat this up.
Do you know how many kids are going to see this? Probably hundreds. Because Barbara's and Vernon's kids and my kids and their kids and their kids and their kids, because these things last for
But you know what I was going to
probably
take
100
visit off now?
Not yet. Go
You
ahead.
want me to still talk?
Yeah, sure. Why not?
But do you know what? Over to this other place, we called it the other place, and it was about a mile or mile and a half. Dad once lived over there, and then they moved over to the log house. But there was this pond, and when kids had a raft, and he would bring the snow would melt, come down into the pond, and in the summer then we'd have a head gate, and we could irrigate the alfalfa field. See, and I'd forgotten all this in there. Yeah. And we'd go there, and we made an old big raft, and us kids would get out on that raft. We had a ball. And it could have drowned us. Nobody knew how to swim.
Now, did one of your brothers drown?
Yes.
What was his name?
Elmer.
Elmer.
Elmer drowned.
How old was he when he drowned?
19.
19. Okay, Mom, hold on just for a minute, will you? I'm going to go get a picture of Elmer. I can figure out how to
Have
turn
you
this.
got one?
Figure out how to turn this thing off. I've got one when you and you were about 2 and he was about 4.
Yeah.
Let me go get that just a minute. Mother,
What?
I went in your bedroom and got this picture. Is this Elmer that you're talking about, and is this you?
Yes.
And you were about what, probably 2
I was
then?
about 2 and he was about 4 and a half, I imagine.
Oh, that's cute. Isn't that cute?
Mm-hmm.
That's really special. Now, he drowned, did he?
He drowned when he was 19.
And he was buried out to Park Valley too?
He was buried at Park Valley.
And your dad was buried there as well?
My dad was buried at Park Valley.
And my dad exhumed both bodies and brought them in and reburied them in
North Ogden.
North Ogden. Mm-hmm. All right, thanks, Mom. I thought maybe I'd like to see that. Mom?
What?
This is a picture of you and Dad when, probably first married?
Oh, probably maybe a year after.
Year
2
after.
years. Mm-hmm.
Okay, I want you to tell us a story about that now, so hold on just a second till I reset the camera up. Just a second, Mom. Hey, Mom, we got the camera reset up. Why don't you go ahead and tell us how you met my dad? Let's see, he was a member of the church, wasn't he, and where you met him and so on, all right?
Yeah, when my dad passed away, Mother couldn't take care of the ranch at all. And because there was Bill and Dolly and myself, and I was 18 and the other two were younger, so we moved to Montello. Well,
That's Nevada, is it?
Huh? Montello, Nevada. And she rented a little house out there, and she was a beautiful seamstress. She could sew everything, and she made one girl out there, Frida Johnson, a complete wedding outfit, her wedding dress and her going away suit and everything, this coat, the skirt, everything. Mother could make anything. So anyway, she took in sewing for a living to kind of keep us going because we had no money, and the estate tied everything up till she couldn't get a thing. She couldn't sell a cow, a horse, or anything. And so we moved there, and so she said, we had a friend that lived there, Faye Killian, and she ran a restaurant. And she came up to the house and she said, she called my mom Vine. Vine, why don't you make that kid go to work? And all I knew was farm and cows and horses. And she said, well, where could she work? And she said, well, in my restaurant. She says, Mother says she don't know anything about a restaurant. She's ate in it a few times. She says, well, I'll teach her. So I went down there and I was frightened to death. And just a kid, 18 years old, and I went down and these railroad men just embarrassed me to no end. It was a railroad cafe. So I got along fine there and was working there. And Mother had a brother come out, Uncle Ben from North Ogden, come out to visit her. And so he liked to walk over to the roundhouse where the trains come in and watch the trains and watch the men wash their overhauls in these great big old steam machines. And so when he walked over there one day, why, Tom, your dad, was in there washing these overhauls. He said, oh, how are you? And so on. Well, I'm from North Ogden. And so Tom said, well, I was from North Ogden too, or Pleasantview. Well, why don't you come up and meet my sister? So he walked up there. And this happened to be, went up with Uncle Ben. And this happened to be Valentine's Day. It was the 22nd of February. And it was 1923. And so Annie Gleason and I had sent into Ogden to rent masquerade costumes. We were having a masquerade out there that night. And we sent in by somebody to bring us out masquerade dresses. So they did, and our dresses did come, and so we were in the bedroom and trying these dresses on and everything. And my sis Bird and her husband lived with us. And she
Bird was the same lady that wrote this history that got you started that you were talking about before.
And she said, you better come out here in the kitchen. She said, there's someone out here that Mother wants you to meet. She said, Uncle Ben brought him up from the roundhouse. I said, I don't want to be bothered with anybody like that. Well, come on. She said, you've got to go out there because Mother said so. And I said, well, Annie and I are trying on our dresses. Well, you get on your own clothes and get out there. So we went out, and that's when I met Tom. And so then he still worked on the railroad, and little by little, he always sat at the counter and talked to me and this, and we got going for walks up and down the tracks. The railroad tracks, that's the only place you go. And then I'd take a quilt, or a blanket or something, and we'd sit out underneath a big old tree. They had a beautiful lawn. Now this was over to the railroad depot and clubhouse where all the men stayed.
Yeah.
So I'd go walk over there with a blanket, and we'd sit under the tree. Well, these railroad men would come and say, "Tom, we're going to whip you out of her." And it was, 2 or 3 of them would sit down on the blanket, you know. So pretty quick, as quick as we got them up, we'd pick up the blanket and go for a walk.
Go somewhere else. Huh?
Yeah, because they just run us right out. So anyway, we just got finally going together and fell head over heels in love, I guess, like all these kids do.
Sure.
And was married on...
Wait a minute, you came in on... Put your hand back so I can see the ring. Just put it on your knee out here now. Like that, yeah. You came into Ogden?
Can't see it on there anyhow.
Yeah. You came into Ogden, Mom?
You mean before we...
To get married, yeah.
Oh, yes. And Mother had already left out there.
Yeah.
And moved to Ogden here, and thought she's tired of Montello and she could move to Ogden. And she moved right down here on 30th and Pingree Avenue. But anyway, Tom got me a job. He said, "I don't think you ought to work here for $50 a month." He said, "Why don't you come over to the railroad restaurant?" He said, "It's a nice place to work." And I said, "Well, I don't know if I can or not." And I was still green at waitress work. So anyway, I went over and talked to the manager, and he said, "Well, a girl was leaving." So he said, "I can put you right on." So he did. But then we had our room and board and everything over there for $68 a month. And boy, that meant something. Then I could send money to Mother, most all of it, because we got a room and board out there.
Sure.
So that she could support these 2 kids, Brother Elmer and Dolly. And then we were married and came in here and got our lives.
You weren't a member of the church, though, were you?
No. Tom was a member and I wasn't.
Tom's dad was a member and his dad was a member.
Their whole family.
About maybe 3 or 4 generations.
Oh, yes.
In your case, so you met him and you were married where now?
First, we were married, a civil marriage in the 13th Ward, right up here in Ogden, by Bishop Jenkins. And then...
what happened? You told me something funny happened. There was a bishop later for God.
Yeah,
what was it?
We went up there, and that 13th Ward has got quite a few high steps. So there was Mother and my sister Clara and Mr. and Mrs. Johnson, friends of ours, it was going to be our witnesses. So we got up there and we waited and waited and waited, and no bishop showed up. I was getting too weak in the knees to stand. I sat down on the steps, and the bishop, he lived just across the street or so, he had overlooked it.
Forgot it, huh?
Yeah. So Tom went over and got him, and he came over, and we were married in the bishop's office.
Okay, then when did you go to the temple?
So then, finally, about 6 years later, I find out that I was going to have a baby. And
first of all, how long was it before he was a member of the church then?
Well, we moved in here. We lived at Montello for 2 years. We moved in here in April of 1926. And in June of the same year, I was baptized.
Right away.
Right up here in the Weber gym. And there was about 20 or 25 kids and myself. And I'd had a new Marcel hair curl, and I wanted to keep my Marcel, didn't want to get it wet. And they explained all about baptism to me up here in the bishop's office and everything. So I asked the bishop if I could wear a bathing cap, and he said, sure. So I wore the bathing cap, and didn't work. I wasn't completely immersed in the water. So about 6 weeks later, I get a letter that I had to be rebaptized. So I have 2 baptisms.
And that time you didn't have a bathing cap on, then?
No, I should say I didn't.
All right, so then you married Dad in the temple when?
So then, when I found out that I was going to have a baby in November, we wanted to go through the temple before Bud was born. We called him Buddy. And sure enough, he was a Buddy boy.
There you go.
But, yeah, we went through down there, and...
So you were carrying your baby when you went to me, when you went through the temple.
And Bud was born in November. We went through the 17th of October. So in later years, when I was pregnant again 9 years later, and wanted, some special thing, so we set
October 17th.
for the girl's birth date.
And the reason you could set that
Because she was a cesarean birth, and you could set any day you wanted if you went early.
So how come you didn't have 10 kids like me, Mom?
Well, if I couldn't have them, I couldn't have them.
All right, thanks, Mom. We love you. Bye-bye.
I'm not a pink lady without white pants on.
Okay. Oh, is that right? Okay, Mom. Tell me a little bit about being a pink lady now.
Well, what do you want to know? How many years I've been up there?
Yeah.
Well, I went up there in 1969, December of 1969, and started out in a little gift shop downstairs in the McCady Hospital. And then a couple of months later, I moved right upstairs. They brought me right upstairs to the big gift shop. And there I was right in there for 15 and a half years.
15 and a half years?
15 and a half years.
So how many days a week did you work?
2 to 3 days a week. Sometimes 4. Whenever they called me, I was up there.
Is that right? So how many hours did you put in?
Almost
6,000.
6,000.
Each one of these pins I'm looking at is for 1,000 hours?
Yes.
Wow.
That's 5,000.
5,000 hours. You know how
I
much?
would have got the 6,000 if I hadn't have had to take off for my knee.
Let me just think for a minute. Let's say it was 6,000 hours at $6 an hour. That would be $36,000 of service you gave them.
Yep.
And all you got was reimbursed for
Gas
the gas.
mileage and meal.
Well,
Every
that's-
4 hours a meal.
A meal. But you made a lot of friends and you comforted a lot of people. Tell me a little bit about some of the things that you saw when you took the flowers up and things like that.
Oh, we had to deliver all the flowers. We had a flower case out in the hall, and people would come in and they wanted certain flowers and that, and then we'd give them a little gift card to put in. They put the room number on it. If not, then we would have to go to the information desk to find out what room they were in and deliver the flowers. And you could just see people up there. Some would be real sick and crippled. It was sad, and others would, not feel quite so bad. And especially the little newborn babies. And every time I'd go up and go by the newborn babies where they were laying in their little cribs, I always had to stop and look at the babies. And then people would come down there and say, I want you to go up. When you go up, look at our baby, the grandma's. Look, watch in the window and see if you can see our baby, because I'd know the name on the flower card, And, I don't know, it was really a beautiful place to work. And the thing that I always thought, and I was talking to Kay Wardell about it, we just felt so proud to be a volunteer and to work that beautiful gift shop.
How much did you say they donated to the hospital this year?
This year, just a week ago, we had a meeting up there, and they gave the administrator, Mr. Pearson, a check for $50,000.
$50,000?
$50,000 for the year. That year.
Wow.
But how we made this money was through the gift shop, was the big money. There's where the most of the money came from. We outdone the snack bar by far. And then we'd have Easter cake sales and Valentine sales. We had pre-Christmas sales. We had, you can't believe the sales that we would put on. And boutiques galore and rummage sales. And that's how the money was all raised.
Well, that's really neat. Mama, I love you. We've been talking here for, about 2 hours?
Imagine.
We're going to do one more little thing, then I'll let you go get lunch or something.
What's that little thing?
I'll tell you in a minute.